Well, good morning, everyone. This is Tyler Glenn. We are going to get started here in a few minutes. We still have a few people that are jumping on. So in a minute or so, I will let our board president, Mike Larson, get our meeting started. So we will have probably another minute or so, Mike, if that's all right. Well, Mike, I guess without further ado, we are at 7:32. So if you would like to get our annual meeting started, that would be fantastic.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me all right, Tyler? All right. Well, thank you and welcome to our 2021 Brainerd Lakes Area Economic Development Corporation's annual meeting. I'm Mike Larson, and I currently serve in the role of president for the BLAEDC board. I am employed by Essentia Health and serve as the vice president of operations in the Brainerd Lakes area. We are pleased to be back hosting the annual event after needing to cancel last year's event due to COVID. And being we did not have an annual meeting last year, I wanted to acknowledge the contributions of Sheila Haverkamp, who served in the executive director role for over 30 years. And we wish Sheila the best in her retirement. She retired January 2020. And we welcome Tyler Glenn in as our new executive director, who started his role about 15 months ago. No question that 2020 has been an unusual year for all of our organizations, and certainly that has been the case as well for BLAEDC. I would like to start by also expressing our gratitude for all our BLAEDC corporate members and for your support of all the programs aimed at expanding business, building community, and growing jobs in Crow Wing County. Last, I'd like to thank all of our economic development partners, including CREDI, Crow Wing County, Crow Wing County HRA, the cities of Baxter, Brainerd, Cross Lake, Jenkins, Nisswa, Pequot Lakes, and Breezy Point. These partnerships are vital to advancing our economic development growth in the region. Normally at this time, we would introduce all of our board members, and they would stand up and you could see who they all are. And maybe with the virtual meeting, maybe I'll just ask that as I introduce you, if you could maybe wave if you're on the call this morning. So start off, Janelle Riley is a co-owner and president of Savantis Technologies. Tom Hagelin, co-owner and CEO of Lindar Corp, Advantech, and Triven. Carlo Gorgas, CEO of Pequot Tool and Manufacturing. Terry McFarland, President and CEO of Anderson Brothers Construction. Mike Dillon, President of Lexington Manufacturing. Jim Hawkinson, Principal with Clifton Larson Allen. And Julie Anderholm, owner of Anderholm Consulting. And John Oline, President and CEO of Deerwood Bank. I'd like to express my appreciation and thanks to Tom Hagelin, our past president. Tom continues to serve on our board and on the executive committee. Thank you, Tom, for your service this past year in your leadership role. I would also like to thank Paul Means from Riverwood Bank. Paul has served on the BLAEDC board for 11 years and just came off our board, and he has become a director emeritus member. I'm not sure that Paul was able to join us, but please join us in thanking Paul for his service when you see him. And lastly, I would like to introduce our BLAEDC staff. Again, if you could wave as I mentioned your names. Tyler Glenn, our executive director. Mike Bjerknes, workforce director. Allison Medic, special initiatives director. And Megan Rabine, our office administrator. And at this time, I'd like to hand it over to Tyler Glenn to lead us through the rest of our meeting. Tyler joined BLAEDC in 2017 to lead our efforts in developing the BLAEDC Unified Fund, which has supported retention expansion of business in the region. He became our executive director at the beginning of 2020. And welcome, Tyler, and I'll hand it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mike, for the introduction and bringing introducing our board and our staff. In Zoom times, I look at this and say we're up to 4 pages on my screen, so that's a pretty good start to an annual meeting. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about everyone joining us this morning. So with that, it's just a very happy good morning. As I know is that one of our speakers, a couple of them that got on early this morning, we're talking about the weather. We couldn't be more thrilled with getting an early spring here in Minnesota, and seeing the snow gone is a pretty welcome sight for our area, certainly. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to our virtual annual meeting. Although we would, of course, love to see everyone in person, shake hands, we felt with the state restrictions that we would err on the side of caution and hold our meeting via Zoom this year. So thank you for your willingness to pull up a screen and join us today. Mike had this idea last year of serving breakfast to everyone and changing from a noon meeting to a breakfast meeting, hoping that depending on the topic, we could keep everybody awake for, after they ate lunch while sitting in a room. So we've switched the times, and hopefully for everyone, it's a good thing. And obviously with the participation that we have today, we feel that this time has worked out, and we can continue maybe on this path as we move forward with our annual meeting. So thank you for everyone for joining us. And I also want to take a second here to recognize our board and to certainly recognize the staff. It takes obviously for all of you know this, it takes a collective effort to do the work that we do, and to the support that our staff has from our wonderful board of directors really makes it easy for us to get the things done that we need to get done to help support our community. So again, a big thank you to Mike Bierknes, to Allison Medic, and to Megan Rabine for all of their help in getting me through this first year, which has been pretty interesting to say the least. And a big thank you to our board. Their support of our efforts here is second to none. We certainly couldn't do the things that we do without their support and guidance. And I lean heavily on them to help me make decisions that are going to be best for our organization. So thank you. Thank you to Tom Hagland, our outgoing president. Tom had the joy of being the president during a pandemic as well. So he did a fantastic job. And I think he's in sunny Florida today. So I think it's a good thing for Tom to be in warm weather. I also wanted to take just a second here to thank Sheila Haverkamp. And Sheila was a mentor to me as I began this role a number of years ago with BLAEDC, but her guidance, her vision, her leadership for 33 years through this organization. Everyone on this call or on this meeting today knows her, knows the work that she did. So Sheila, thank you for everything that you've done for us and for this organization. Well, 2020 has been a year of firsts. For most of us, it's our first global pandemic, our first statewide mask mandate, our first experience with business interruptions due to a pandemic. I can say with certainty that the people and businesses in Crow Wing County have led by example and worked very hard to get creative and keep their respective places of business moving forward. We had businesses that shifted their focus to make masks, hand sanitizers, other essential products. The Brainerd Chamber of Commerce creating the Cuisine Cash program to help out our local bars and restaurants. Our schools and their move to distance learning, which caused teachers, administrators, board members, and students to figure out how to work differently to ensure that our education didn't crumble. CTC placed Wi-Fi hotspots all over the area so kids and adults alike could stop and learn or work if they did not have access to services in their homes. They also created kits, and hopefully Christy will talk about this a little bit, maybe she'll touch on this, but they created kits for homeowners to install their own equipment to keep their technicians and the homeowners safe as we ventured through this pandemic. The Brainerd YMCA, they provided free daycare to children in our county for frontline workers. The never-ending work of our nonprofits to provide food and necessary services to the citizens of this county. We've had employees create office spaces out of any available room in their houses so they can work remotely. We've all had to figure out how to Zoom and how to mute and unmute in our virtual world. I've yet to figure out what the run on toilet paper was, but we can certainly debate that another day. And through it all, we are starting to see some light at the end of this pandemic. As I began my new role as executive director in January, I did not anticipate leading BLAEDC through a global pandemic in year one. I'm honored to say that with the help and guidance of an amazing board of directors, our staff, community leaders, and my family, BLAEDC was able to help so many in 2020. Although many challenges presented themselves, BLAEDC has assisted and guided Crow Wing County businesses through these unprecedented times. We partnered with the county to administer the CARES Act grant program, which provided grants to small businesses in the county that were forced to close their place of business due to an executive order. In total, $2.9 million was distributed to 259 businesses that met the requirements. I personally want to commend the leadership of Crow Wing County for their approach to the use of these federal funds and how hard they work to ensure that they helped as many people as possible through this program. 2020 created a number of challenging circumstances for all of us, but through that, BLAEDC continued to focus on areas that are completely unique to the world of traditional economic development. The key recruitment program and the BLAEDC Unified Fund have allowed us to play an integral role in workforce and lending for our communities that reside in Crow Wing County. BLAEDC will continue our core work in economic development with our staff of talented professionals who are here to help guide you through those processes. As we move forward in 2021 and beyond, we find it more important than ever to work together to do the best that we can to stand firm with our mission to expand business, build community, and grow jobs in Crow Wing County. BLAEDC is committed to providing resources and expertise to assist the companies and individuals in Crow Wing County. Of course, we need the support of our community partners and our membership to continue providing the services we do. I want to show you all a glimpse of our new annual report, which will be available for viewing at the conclusion of today's meeting on our website. And here's a list of all of our supporters. You'll give me just a second. So hopefully all of you right now can see the beginning of our new electronic annual report. So with the help of Allison Medic and the rest of our staff, this beautiful report was created. Over the years, we have created a paper copy that if we were all in person today, you'd have a copy of that at your place where you're sitting at your table. But we have decided to continue moving forward in a digital platform, and so we've created a digital electronic annual report. I won't go through each slide, but I wanted to, and please don't get blurry while I slide through these, but what we're going to do is that I wanted to slide down to highlight our government partners. Mike Larson did mention our government partners in his opening, but as we look through some of these slides, we couldn't do the things that we do without our government partners. And the support that we get from our city councils, our mayors, our community leaders in each one of these, the people that lead the EDA commissions in each of these communities. We work side by side with those folks to make sure that we can deliver the services that they support us to do in their communities. And we hope that we live up to the expectations that they have for us. But as you can see here, Baxter, Brainerd, Breezy Point, Creedy, which is the Cuyuna Regional Economic Development Group that covers all of the Cuyuna Lakes area. Cross Lake, Crow Wing County, the Crow Wing County HRA, the City of Jenkins, the City of Nisswa, and Pequot Lakes. From me to all of you, thank you very much for your continued support. Next, we can go on and show our premier members. At the bottom of this slide, I will show you the levels of participation that businesses that want to become a member of BLAEDC and what it would take for them to become that, to become at whatever level they're looking for here. So our premier members, Essentia Health, Cuyuna Regional Medical Center, CTC, Bremer Bank, Brainerd Public Utilities, Minnesota Federal Credit Union, and Just for Kicks. Thank you to all of those partners for their continued support. Next is our listing of our gold members. I won't go through each one of those. I'll just give everyone a minute to see who they are. Again, membership support is one of the driving factors in allowing BLAEDC to do the work that we do. So thank you again. and on to our silver members, and on to our bronze members, and also includes our individual memberships. And inside of our individual memberships, I would also like to mention that most of these folks are individuals that support us and support our BLAEDC execs, which are some of the retired executives in our community that assist us with different programs and activities that we work through. And it's fantastic to have their support and continue to have their support as we continue to do the work that we do. So with that, I will stop sharing that screen and we will move on to the next portion of our meeting. Thank you all for the time to introduce myself, but also to introduce our staff and to talk briefly about the programs and activities that we've been working on through this pandemic and as we come out of this, and certainly look to us and to our website and to our social media channels for some of the exciting things that BLAEDC has coming up here in the next handful of months. We're excited to move some things into a different direction, but to maintain the core values that this organization stands by, and the work that we continue to do, we will continue to do that. So sorry about the redundancy. Next, I would like to take a minute here to introduce Steve Barrows. Steve Barrows is a Crow Wing County Commissioner and the chair of the Crow Wing County Board. Commissioner Barrows represents District 3, which covers both the cities of Baxter and Brainerd. He has graciously agreed to provide an update from Crow Wing County. And I want to thank Commissioner Barrows for taking some of his time to join us this morning. Commissioner Barrows, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tyler. I appreciate it, and welcome everybody. It's a great day out there. The sun is shining. I think that's a positive for us. I'm looking forward to 2021, but I'd like to go over just a few things from 2020 that Crow Wing County did to get us, or to help the business community get through some of the struggles that they were through. Immediately, I think our management, along with the board, began to look at what do we have to do to be nimble. And I think we took the steps to do that. I think we were proactive. When I compare Crow Wing County to other counties around the state, we were very proactive. We were very forward-looking. We were one of the first counties to start looking at what can we do for our community businesses. And one of the things that we considered was, and put into effect, was the waiver abatement, or a penalty abatement waiver program for the 2020 taxes, which we felt was necessary to help them get through the tax season, which is a pretty difficult time for most of them. And so we initiated that. We looked at what do we have to do to protect our staff, because one of the important missions of the county is to provide the services that you all pay for through your property taxes. And so we had to come up with a plan to protect our staff, make sure that they could be on site and working, and some not on site. So we divided a lot of our groups in half, and some of those we divided even further into subgroups, so that if one group was impacted by COVID, we could always have another team step in and continue the services that we have to provide. So that was real important for us. We were one of the founding partners in the Lakes Country Cares approach. I think that was a wonderful program. It was right at the beginning of the COVID process or virus. So it was important to let people who were coming into our area know that we care about our businesses and we want to support our businesses. So then we got the CARES Act, which was a little over $7 million. And the one thing that I'm really proud of as the board chair is when we received those dollars, we of course had our plan to disperse those dollars to the various businesses around the community, and that took some work. And I want to thank publicly Tyler Glenn and his group over at BLAEDC. They were willing to partner and be one of the leaders. Kim Rollins over at United Way stepped up on the nonprofit side, and with their assistance with the county staff, we put that into effect. But here's the point that I want to make. There's lots of partners in this process, and if you take all the dollars, each local government unit got a set amount of dollars. Our partners, Brainerd, Baxter, Nisswa, and I can't even name all the cities that had dollars left over when they were through dispersing their dollars, donated those to us so that we could do it on a county-wide basis rather than a city geographic area. In the state of Minnesota, all the dollars that got turned back to counties, this county represents 16% of all those dollars that were given back to the county to disperse. That's a huge number when you think of 87 counties. So I'm very proud of that fact. I'm very proud of the communities within our county that were willing to partner up to recognize the difficulties that the businesses were having. So that I think that's a significant piece that should be acknowledged out there. Again, we were one of the first counties to invest in broadband, and our partner at CTC, who came along with us and gave us a guarantee for eligibility under the CARES Act requirements, they were a super partner, and we certainly appreciated that. It helped the school districts and just the businesses, a lot of the home-based businesses out there. It was a tremendous effort on their part, and we appreciate that. And so thank you, Christy, for all the work that you folks did over there. We administered $500,000 to the various school districts in Crow Wing County. We did $177,000 or $171,000 for the daycare in Crow Wing County over at the YMCA. That was given as free. So Crow Wing County was really active in all that. And then just a quick note, I know I'm getting a little bit long-winded here. One quick thing. In 2020, and this is a kind of a measurement piece of data, our sales tax collection, which we get a 0.5% sales tax, was $7.4 million, up $200,000 from 2019. That shows you the attractiveness of Crow Wing County. It also shows you that people were tired of being cooped up in their homes, but they came to Crow Wing County regardless of the problems that they were experiencing, and they spent their dollars here. And for that, we're forever appreciative. But I think going forward in 2021, I think we can look at the same thing. I think we've positioned ourselves well for 2021 in the businesses. Like Tyler mentioned, we're great partners in making sure that we kept the COVID issue down as much as we can. We see it plateauing right now. So I think that 2021 is a great opportunity for us to get closer to where we were in 2019 in terms of businesses being open in that, or early in 2020. I do have one reservation, and that's in the hospitality industry, and we need to get those opened up because they plan now for the summer, and the longer we wait to be able to work with them and get them fully open, it's a struggle for them. So other than that, I think it's a great time. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and come before you. I hope you have a great meeting. I have a board meeting coming up in a few minutes here, so I'm going to have to leave you, but thank you, everybody. Have a great meeting. Thank you, Tyler. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Christy, and all the business in Crow Wing County for taking care of our people and making sure that we have a good economy here. So thank you very much. Thank you, Tyler.
Thanks, Commissioner Barrows. And from my seat, it's been great to work with the county and County Administrator Houle and all of the commissioners. They've done a wonderful job in supporting our businesses in Crow Wing County, and they've been very quick and very responsive when funds have come across their desk to be able to utilize those funds and get them out to our businesses. So thank you. It's been an honor to work with you and continue to work with you. And thank you for your time. And we're coming up to construction season, which is the summer in Minnesota. So we're excited about that. But thank you very much for your time this morning, Commissioner Barrows. Next, we are going to introduce Candace Zimmerman. Candace is the new executive director of the Northland Arboretum, and much like myself, started her role leading the ARB during the pandemic. And as much fun as it has been for a lot of people to lead their organizations, especially challenging for Candace as she came to our area, brand new person and family to our area here in Brainerd, in the Brainerd Lakes area, and to leading a wonderful organization like the Arboretum. So Thank you very much, Candace, for joining us this morning. Candace is going to talk a little bit about her process of working with Mike Bierkness and she got through the workforce program here, and what it has meant to her to work with Mike and through that program. But also, I'm hoping that she's going to provide an update and give us some background on the Arboretum as well. So Candace, thank you very much, and welcome to our annual meeting.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. And again, thank you for the invitation. As most of you, I think I've met a lot of you on this meeting. So thank you guys for welcoming me into this community. It's been a lot of fun. And as Tyler mentioned, I started kind of at the same time as he did at the beginning of this pandemic. So despite the wild ride, it's been a lot of fun. So yes, me and my family are new to the area. I have 2 children at the Harrison Elementary School, and then a husband who just started in the workforce here too. So we are getting rooted in the community and having a lot of fun doing it. And yes, I'm here to talk about the Key Recruitment Program and my work with Mike over there at BLAEDC. So about a year ago, the ARB partnered with BLAEDC and utilized the program to find me. I wanted to share my experience and how important the program is for the local economy. So in hindsight, I think Mike had a really heavy lift in trying to find somebody. The ARB was suffering from repeated leadership turnover. So there was a lot of unknowns within the organization anyway. And then at the start of COVID, it was kind of a scary time for the staff, I think. Those unknowns, I think we're in a much better place right now. I think we're focused, and I'll share a little bit of a status update with you here shortly. So in addition to the leadership turnover, I think Mike also had a mission of trying to find a leader with unique talents, because the ARB is a unique organization. It's an amazing community asset for the Brainerd-Baxter area. It's deeply rooted in the community. I think what I love about chatting with members and with community partners is everybody has a story about the ARB. So they, have grown up there, and people have great memories there. And I want to keep it as an organization that is welcoming for all. So I commend Mike, and I commend BLAEDC for looking outside the box and looking outside the community for an ARB leader, because not only did it open up an amazing opportunity for myself and my family to come to a great community and a welcoming community, but it brought in an outside perspective for the organization and outside talent. And ultimately, that's, I believe, what the program is all about. And it's about wanting to strengthen the community with talent and with great leaders. So I thank Mike for having great discussions with me right off the bat. So in my perspective, Mike was a great person to reach out to, because he picked up the phone and just had a really candid, honest conversation with me about what the ARB needed. He was a great liaison between the organization and the candidates for this leadership role. He was forthcoming about the challenges that the ARB was facing and what was needed there at that point in time. He spoke about the Brainerd-Baxter community with a sense of passion. He really let me see kind of on a larger scope what the community was all about. And that's really kind of what sold me about interviewing for this position, because he was able to share such great insight on the other partner organizations that the ARB utilized, and the school districts, and what the YMCA offered to the community and to families. And so that insight was very helpful in getting over that fear of relocating my family and kind of starting fresh in a community. So he even provided a list of names of people that I needed to reach out to become more comfortable. So the Newcomers Club, for example, was somebody that he connected me with. And it is scary coming into a community in a new career sense, and having a lot of unknowns. So knowing that I had Mike to reach out to and to ask questions and to say, hey, I don't know where to bring my kids to for a pediatrician. He is a person that I knew that I could reach out to, a trusted individual in the community. So Mike, I thank you for your candor, and I thank you for everything that you've done for me and for the ARB. And any leaders on this call today, if you're looking for a leadership position within your organization, I highly recommend reaching out to Mike and utilizing the Key Recruitment Program, because for me, despite the pandemic and despite coming in at an unknown time, it was still a delightful experience. So that's what I have to say about the program. And if anybody needs any other insight to the program, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And the ARB is still in a great position even now, despite the pandemic, and membership has been increasing over this time. I think a lot of people have understood how important being in the outdoors is, and how important that space specifically is to the Brainerd-Baxter area. So going forward, what I'd like to see is, I would love to partner with BLAEDC and see how we can get the ARB to be even more well-known in the community, even more well-known beyond our current area as a tourism aspect of Brainerd-Baxter, and continue to thrive. So thank you for the time today, Mike. Thank you, Tyler, again for the invite, and looking forward to the rest of our meeting.
Well, thank you very much, Candace, and thank you for joining us. It's great to hear your story, and for all of us that know Mike and know the program, and it's great to hear and these success stories, and bringing a new wonderful family into our community is so important. And it's very nice to hear that things are going well at the ARB, and also to, we'll talk. I'd love to partner with the ARB to bring some more awareness to the Arboretum in and of itself, and see what more we can do as partners to help each other move along. That'd be great for us. So thank you, Candace. I really appreciate your time and all of your efforts over there in getting the ARB through the start of a pandemic, and hopefully as we see the other side of it, it's great. And I've kind of gotten lost over there, so that's my story to the ARB. So my kids said they knew where they were going. I don't believe them still to this day, but anyway. One thing before I introduce Christy, I want to mention is that I showed a picture of our couple of slides of our annual report. Our annual report will be available after this meeting on our website, so you can access the digital version of that on our website after the meeting today. So just wanted to make sure everyone had that information. Well, next, it is an honor for me to introduce Christy Westbrook. And most of you on this call know Christy, but Christy is the CEO and General Manager of CTC. And with our focus today for our meeting on broadband and the impact it has on our local, regional, state, and national markets, we've asked Christy to provide some updates on CTC and what some of the things that they're working on, and what the future looks like in Crow Wing County and beyond. So Christy, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tyler. It is great to be here today, and BLAEDC, as usual, an extremely strong partner in making sure that the economics of our local communities continue to thrive. I today have a PowerPoint presentation, and so I'm going to have Megan pull that up, and you can go to the next slide, Megan. So yeah, I just want to start by thanking Tyler and the crew at BLAEDC for everything that you do. Tyler, I have to comment that every time I've reached out to you with some type of idea, even when it's a little bit wonky and something that we don't typically look at or typically want to do, you always take the time to vet what we're looking at and give some advice and work with us. So I thank you very much for the open-mindedness that BLAEDC has, and look forward to working with you guys all into the future. Next slide. So CTC, as many of you know, we are a cooperative. And so a cooperative works for our membership. And so when you think about a cooperative, we do two things. We do things in cooperation with others, so a cooperative effort. And that's why you'll hear me talk a lot today about how we partner with different entities. And then a marked willingness to cooperate. And so you'll see us many times as community partners, community sponsors in our local areas to make sure that we're cooperating for the best and the betterment of our communities. So just a few things about CTC. We were established in 1952. We are a provider of internet, TV, phone, and IT solutions. We have 14,000 residential and business members. We have 73 employees with the increase of employees of about 20 of them coming over just the last several years based on our growth. And we have our home base, our technical base is in Brainerd, but we also have offices in Baxter and Crosby, but I am going to show you how we're serving the entire state and beyond. So these are clips of our three offices, Baxter, Brainerd, Crosby. All right, so these are the real offices that we've experienced this year. You will see in this picture, we had this collage made about a week after we told everybody that they had to go and start working from home. And honestly, it was a transition that I can't tell you how smooth it went. And I'm so proud of our staff at CTC that they transitioned so quickly into a home base and didn't miss a beat. We're so committed to continuing to serve our members as the need for broadband was absolutely skyrocketing during that time. You'll see a picture off to the very far right of your screen with a little laptop, a little telephone lamp, and an iPad sitting next to it. That was my first week of a home office. That didn't last very long. It's now quite bigger and more robust than that. But in the back of my mind, I think I thought I was going back to the office in about a week. And so I was confident I could work out of that little space for a little while. And again, it looks much differently now. And I also thought when I started seeing these pictures from employees is there any work getting done? Because there were so many pets and different things in all of these pictures. So I'm sure you have all had similar experiences. The next slide. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about our footprint, because I think a lot of times when you think CTC, you just think this local area. But our footprint really has expanded, and it's expanded through working with government, municipalities, counties, townships, you name it, and we're willing to work with them and partner with them. So you'll see our most recent adds to our service area include the Long Prairie Market. We now serve the entire city limits of Long Prairie. There's a partnership with the city of Long Prairie. We serve the business community of Little Falls, again, with a great partnership with the Morrison County, the EDA, the city of Little Falls, some great businesses in that area that came together to make sure that they could have robust fiber broadband. And then you'll see going off to the Mille Lacs area and the Aiken area, that's all expansion area for us. But if you look at the Minnesota map on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll also see a network that's outlined in the turquoise. That's the Northeast Services Cooperative Network. That was a stimulus project during the Obama administration, and they received money to build a middle mile network. And so what that means is that they were only interested in serving anchor institutions. And so governments, hospitals, libraries, city halls, municipal buildings. We now have partnered with them we put what's called last mile on that network, which means it's the network that gets to the business consumers or to the residential homes. So that has allowed us to do some work up in that area and bring fiber internet to over 100 business customers in that area now. And we'll be doing our first residential project this summer in Cherry Township in that area. And then you'll also see the highlighted turquoise area. That's the Arrowhead of Minnesota, and we work with Arrowhead Electric to service all of their electric membership with broadband. And so they own the network, They service the network, but we in Brainerd do all of the back office support from them other than their frontline customer service. So we get their bandwidth to them. We do all of their large business sales. We take care of all of their large business customers. We do everything from A to Z on the technical side for them. And that work then resides in our local area with that partnership. The next slide. So just a little bit about us in the past few years. We've seen an average increase in membership in the past 5 years of 4.6%. We passed 26,073 addresses in our service area. We have applied for total grant funds and secured total grant funds by CTC and our partners of $35.3 million. And our total route of miles of fiber as of the end of 19 was 4,098 miles of fiber. So let's talk a little bit about the economic value that these projects bring to the local communities. So 3.1% is the average increase in a home when there's fiber internet that is connected to the home. And I can't tell you how many times we receive a phone call post the purchase of a home thinking that internet will be available, and it's not. And it is just such it's a hard conversation to have with somebody when they just assume that broadband is going to be there. They make that immediate assumption and find out that it isn't. And there's been some people that have taken significant leadership positions in the community that have bought homes in areas that didn't have that connection that they needed, made it so difficult for them. We try to fill those gaps as best as we can, but without support and without grant funding, it just really financially is not feasible for our membership to support those projects. Next slide. So let's talk about real estate sales. The second question after real estate sales of the price is there high-speed internet? And you continually see that there's high sales and turnover when there isn't the internet to get to an area where they have the fiber capacity or the high speed capacity that they need. It definitely attracts business, and we saw that so much this year. We have also seen where if it's not available, that there's some difficult situations that we experienced over in Todd County, where they had the opportunity to have a very large manufacturing company moved to their area, and after they saw that there was no high-speed internet for them to connect to, they pulled the project. That was prior to us building in the Long Prairie area, but that was one that was very tough on the county because it would have spurred a great deal of economic development for them. And people need connectivity wherever they're located, or if they're working from home, from their small business here in the Brainerd Lakes area. Of course, the remote or roaming workforce, more homes and cabins. We saw a huge increase of usage throughout the weeks and for a lot longer on the weekends. Steve Barrows touched on it today when he talked about the tax base and that we saw people kind of flooding last March to the area to come back to their cabins. You know, typically we have a rush of seasonal installs that would happen somewhere around the end of April, May, before Memorial Day is really when our rush is. And last year we started getting those calls mid-March, and the month of March just got crazy because people were coming back and wanted their internet connections. And then of course, distance learning. And we can see that that's going to continue into the foreseeable future, and just connecting families and being able to connect virtually for holidays and those types of things. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just want to point out that this is what it's honestly taken for us to be able to continue our growth. It has taken 11 years of grant funded projects to be able to get to the point that we're at today, and to be able to cover the amount of fiber construction that we've had in our local communities. And so you can see that these are some federal, some state, some municipal. And then recently in 2020, and I sincerely thank the county for doing this, but we were able to secure CARES funding to build out areas that had a high volume of students without access to distance learning, to be able to get them connected also. And so when you hear about broadband as a topic at the state capitol or at a federal level, these projects do not happen without some sort of financial support, because there's no financial sustainability in offering a $60 broadband package when the cost to build to somebody's home can be well over $10,000 at times. You can't make those models work. And the only way that we'll be able to get the entire country connected is through funding mechanisms that will sustain the networks into the future. So the next slide. And this just really, I think, gives you a great view of breaking down the dollars. And so I'm going to go to the CTC only projects. And so our total locations that we've received grant funding for, just a little over 6,000. We have applied for over $33 million in funding. We've been awarded nearly $12 million in funding. CTC then has matched that with $10.5 million of the membership's money to continue to build broadband. So the total grant funds that were awarded and committed to by CTC, just a little over that 22 million mark. But when you look at the top of the slide, you'll see that we talk about our partner applications. So that includes Arrowhead Electric, Mille Lacs Electric, the townships or municipals that we're working with. We have a tribal project with the Boys Fort tribe that we're working on right now. So that total, when you see, is we've applied for almost $60 million in funding, and we've been awarded $18.4 million. But then if you look at the commitment again of what is being matched, it comes at a $17 million price tag. So the total grant funds that have come through CTC and our partners for economic development and to build broadband is $35.3 million. And I think there's a ton to be said about that. But what I really want to point out is that money then is spent locally. We do everything in our power to hire local contractors, local help. When we're buying dirt to fill the holes back in after we've dug the fiber line, we buy that locally. So that money then really compounds in the local area with the workers staying overnight, eating at restaurants. So how you quantify that total grant into what it does for the community, I think would be a really interesting white paper that we've talked about. Hopefully we can work on someday with the Blandon Foundation. Next slide. So the bottom line is, where there's high-speed internet, there's economic growth and thriving families. And with that, Tyler, I'm going to open it up for questions if somebody wants to ask one. Otherwise, that is what I have for today, and looking forward to hearing Shirley speak about broadband.
Thank you very much, Christy. And it's exciting things to talk about. Would you just, so there was a feature, I know that a lot of people have in this audience have heard of this, but there was a program that featured CTC here recently. It was called the Advancement TV series, and it was featured on CNBC January 23rd, I believe it aired. It was a show with that is hosted by Ted Danson. Could you just touch on that really briefly and tell people where they can find that if they would like to see a really fantastic feature on CTC?
Sure. So we were contacted by the Advancement series to go out and to work with them on spreading the need for rural broadband and how that needs to be supported and the economic development it brings to local communities. So we worked with them to develop this TV show that then aired on CNBC, starring Tyler Glenn. Let's see, we had Kyle Bauer from CRMC was also in the video. So it was really a well done, kind of looking at the total overview of the impact of broadband. I believe the series is linked to our website, but Tyler, I could get that back over to you of how people can access it. But I believe that it's now linked there if people want to watch it. Otherwise, they can go directly to the Advancement series website and they can search the CTC one and on broadband, and they'll also find it there.
Yeah, thanks. It was a really really neat feature, and I was happy to lend a few minutes to that program, and you know, as your parents always tell you how great you look on TV, so my mom told me, so I felt pretty good about that, so that was a nice thing. But the nice thing about that is that it really gave a true picture of the work that CTC is doing in this area, and and the reach of broadband and what it can do in our communities. And yeah, Kyle Bauer featured on there and talking about the impact that good quality broadband has for telemedicine. And I know that Mike Larson, our board president, would echo that statement as well. So really nicely done. You can find it on Prime Video, actually. So if you have on Prime
great.
Video, it's out there. But yeah, we've shared the link on our website or on our social media channels as well. But a program that was really well done. So thank you very much for that, Christy. Does anybody have any questions for Christy before we turn it over to our feature speaker today? If they do, they can raise their hand or type it in the chat function. I don't know that I can see the chat function right now, but well, if not, people can have a chance to comment and ask a question of Christy as we move on in our featured presentation today. So I just want for everyone just a heads up that while Shirley is speaking today, a couple of things, I'll be monitoring the boxes, and if anybody has a question, feel free to raise their hand and we'll get to that. I know Shirley wants to have this as a pretty interactive presentation, but also feel free to type in the chat function, and then I will be monitoring those, and we can ask questions when Shirley's presentation is done. And that way we can, if folks on this have some questions that are both locally based, regionally based, nationally based, I'm sure that with our experts that we have on the meeting today, we'll get everything answered. And with that, so I will move on. I would like to very proudly introduce Shirley Bloomfield. Shirley is the Chief Executive Officer of NTCA, which is the Rural Broadband Association, and which she shared with me, NTCA is National Telephone Cooperative Association. Am I right, Shirley? A big nod. Okay, excellent. The premier association representing nearly 850 independent telecommunication companies that are leading innovation in rural and small town America. With more than 30 years of experience representing the country's smallest telecom operators, Shirley is an expert on the role of federal communications policies in sustaining the vitality of rural and remote communities and the benefits rural broadband networks bring to millions of American families, businesses, and the national economy. Shirley has a strong track record of leadership in aligning strategic partnerships among rural telecom companies, their larger counterparts, other rural utilities, and federal agencies, advancing digital equity and economic opportunities for rural Americans. Under her leadership, NTCA has promoted public-private partnerships among rural communication providers, along with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and FCC, resulting in hundreds of millions of dollars flowing into rural communities to advance broadband networks and help close the digital divide. Shirley is a strong supporter of national efforts to improve the resiliency and reliability of critical electric and telecommunications infrastructure, and serves as a board member of the National Rural Telecommunications Cooperative and the Southeast Reliability Corporation. One last thing before I hand this over to Shirley. Recently, and this was brought to us, Christy shared this with us, and she's shaking her head, like Shirley was named one of the most influential people in Washington by Washingtonian magazine. So I hope that that has brought a lot of excitement into your life, Shirley, as you've graciously accepted those awards. But thank you very much for joining us today, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Well, what a treat to be here with all of you. And after that introduction, you're probably like, okay, yeah, whatever. But I do want to say it is truly an honor to be here with you. Christy Westbrook is one of the rock stars that I look up to. So you may not even know how lucky you are to have her in your community. I've worked with Christy and with Mike, and I've even been to Madden's on the Lake for an NTCA meeting. So we are looking forward to getting travel up and running so we can host an event back up in your neck of the woods and continue to support your economic development. So you heard a little bit about who I represent, and CTC is just an example, although I would say on the leading edge, Tyler, of some of the folks that we represent. But we do cover the rural parts of this country, and that gives us some insight. And so what I wanted to just share a little bit today is a little bit about broadband deployment, why it matters, why it's harder than you think, and where we stand as a country. And Christy and I kind of can do a 1-2 punch, because I think she teed up perfectly what you're looking at on the ground. And I just want to take it up a little bit higher, because I do think that we're at such an interesting point in our country. Because, for example, we wouldn't even be able to have this discussion if it weren't for the broadband that is provided in your community. So, I think about how much we've learned over the course of the past year and why that matters on a federal policy front. So just a very brief history lesson. 100 years ago, 150 years ago, as communication started developing, Alexander Hamilton created the telephone, as a commercial opportunity. What happened was the large companies, the Bell companies at that time, before they were broken up by monopoly deregulation, provided service in the urban parts of our country. And it made perfect sense, because you had a cluster of population in a high density area. It was pretty easy to serve those areas. What happened at that time is the rest of the country, the rural parts of our country, were left behind, because the Bell companies, the large companies, saw no financial reasons to go into an area where, frankly, the cost of the infrastructure is exactly the same as the cost of an infrastructure, regardless of your population base. The difference is you have so many fewer people to spread that cost between. So what you had is you had companies and cooperatives like CTC get started, because citizens in those areas were left behind. And it's just kind of interesting to me in this day and age, when we talk a lot about inclusion and how important inclusion is. I look at the evolution of communication service as the ultimate step towards inclusion, where you had these communities that banded together and said, what about us? Don't we deserve to be connected to the whole? And there was also recognition that the more Americans you connect to the network, the more valuable the network is. The more you can have commerce go across the country, the more the network kind of builds upon its own value. So again, what you had is, at one point, you had about 2,000 independent providers across the country. And we're now down to about 1,000 with a little bit of consolidation. But the important things about a company like CTC is, when Christy mentioned cooperative, it is literally a network that is owned by the subscribers. So when you think about the very base core, Minnesota is a stronghold for cooperatives. You've got well over 1,000 different cooperatives in the state: farmer cooperatives, electric cooperatives, certainly telecommunication cooperatives, healthcare cooperatives, food cooperatives. But the beauty of that model is there's not driven by a profit motive. They're driven by a service motive. So how they can provide service to those in their community. So the question is, as we take it up a little bit higher, all right, so you've got some great broadband in some of your areas. You've also got some areas that, as Christy noted, are really hard to serve, expensive to serve, and quite frankly, might be served by a provider who is less interested in putting their resources into their rural parts of their service territory, because they're really focused on what they might consider their competitive territory. Maybe it's Minneapolis, maybe it's somewhere else in the country like Chicago or Denver. So there's less motivation to actually invest. So you've got what I really think of as a rural divide. You've got a rural America served by communication providers who literally live, work, play, go to church, see people in the grocery store who they're customers. That makes a really big difference. Your kids are going to those schools. You're very focused on, am I bringing the right and the best technologies in, as opposed to somebody who might be sitting in Denver, Colorado, and just has less motivation in terms of really putting some of those monies in some of those areas. Just sharing a very quick example. I spent a very brief time working for a very large national provider. And I'll never forget, at the time, I had just come from working for all these small providers. And I said to them, look, we're not doing a very good job as a big company serving some of these rural communities, particularly in the northwestern part of the United States. And I said, I know some small carriers who would be very interested in buying these properties if we're not going to serve them the best we can. And the CEO pondered and came back to me and said, no, you know what? We're actually not interested, because we don't have to upgrade. There's no competition. and they're cash cows for us. And I thought, wow, you have just articulated why you are leaving rural America as kind of second-class citizens. But I do think that we as a country have learned so much during this pandemic. And I think nationwide, there's a ton of attention from federal policymakers, really significantly for the first time, really focused on what does it mean to have unserved Americans? What has happened during this pandemic when people couldn't work from home, kids couldn't learn from home, students are going to a McDonald's parking lot to get connectivity. They don't have a CTC in their backyard to proactively think about how you serve those students at home. So I think we've got a really interesting opportunity. A lot of people talk about, well, how many Americans are really unserved or underserved? And that number is very, very difficult to kind of pin down. And we know it's well over 15 million. It could be as high as 30 or 40 million. But the important thing is we've got this moment in time where we can really take what we've learned during this pandemic and apply it as we think about national policy, because we just finished one round of stimulus that the House will vote on tomorrow, which I think will be interesting for all of you. I've loved hearing your stories of partnership, collaboration, how the community, how the CARES Act, how you all think together about where that money makes the most sense. I think we've got an opportunity. The bill that will go through tomorrow will provide some emergency benefit for students, for their connectivity, things that frankly we should have been thinking about as a country 8 months ago. Maybe nobody thought we'd still be in this situation, but I certainly think that by last September, we should have been a little bit ahead of the curve. So what did we learn about broadband during the pandemic? A couple of things I'd share. Christy mentioned the value of fiber in terms of reselling homes. We learned that speed matters. You know, we could clunk along and check our emails with a 10-1 connection, but we couldn't do VPNs. We couldn't have students sitting at the kitchen counter while mom and dad are working, you know, in the family room. We also learned that people now have to upload as fast as they download. It's why this is working so beautifully for all of us today. That didn't used to be the case. We used to just download an article or a document or an email. Well, now we need to be able to transmit both ways just as fast. That's a symmetrical network, and that is what fiber can provide. So one of the things that we are really mindful of as Congress looks at infrastructure is talking to Congress about the fact that yes, roads and bridges and airports, really, really important. But what is really the 21st century superhighway? It's going to be broadband connectivity. It's going to be that piece that allows us to be flexible. So without kind of dulling everybody, because I'm not sure you've had your second cup of coffee, I just want to share a few thoughts about how we reach those who are really unserved, or what I would also say is underserved, where they are getting by with speeds that are probably not as adequate as we might have thought a year ago. First of all, we as a country have to do mapping. We don't even know what the problem is. So we're trying to attack this problem of how do we get these communities served, but we don't know who's totally served and who's unserved. We don't know what's really out there. Congress finally appropriated some money to actually start mapping. That's going to be a really important first step. Second of all, what's the best use of federal programs? How do we make sure that the programs that Christy talked about don't cannibalize each other? How do we make sure that where CTC has gotten some funding, that somebody else isn't getting federal funding to overbuild the network that she and her team have so diligently put into the ground? We talk a lot about competition. Isn't competition great? Christy was spot on. These markets were meant to be a monopoly in a lot of ways, simply because you cannot build a business model to not only build the broadband to rural consumers where there may be 2 or 3 subscribers per mile that you are supporting that infrastructure. I live in Arlington, Virginia. There are 600 people per square mile. You can bet that Verizon has no problem monetizing that kind of a network. So how do we make sure we don't overbuild what has already been put in the ground on the government's dime? How do we create incentivized state partnerships? And this is a shout out to all of you in Minnesota. I just had the opportunity to meet with 35 states and their state broadband offices. And I was clear with them. I hold out Minnesota's border to border program, which is your state broadband program, as the best run program that I see out there. What your state has been able to do is look at it a little bit more granular and say, we're do we fill in the spots? And with companies like CTC and some of your other independents in the state and other players in the state getting in to help kind of fill in those pieces so that we get people connected. The other thing I would say is state partnerships and local partnerships. You know, listening to Tyler, I know that, you know, you all at Brainerd Lakes have done a masterful job working with the CARES Act. How do you take some of that funding and plug it into the community in a broadband infrastructure type of way? Those partnerships on every single level are so incredibly powerful. So kudos to you for thinking that way. And simply the fact that you're having this meeting today shows that you actually really are wired that way. The other thing I would say is we've got to be thinking a little bit creatively about partnerships. Again, and you're going to be tired of hearing me say CTC, but again, I wasn't kidding when I said that Christy is like one of those people with a vision that if I could morph her and put her out there across the country, I think we'd be a lot further along. But the work that CTC has done working with municipalities, with electric co-ops, we're thinking about who are those other interesting parties that we can partner with to actually get the job done. So, and the last thing I would say in terms of things that we've learned is we've got to aim higher and do better. Right now, I'm seeing a big initiative for people to plug in holes with what I would call really substandard technology. They're saying, you know what, that rural community, let's go put a fixed wireless product in there. Not that a fixed wireless product, if you're in a pinch, isn't bad, but I would say it's a Band-Aid. It is not a long-term solution. When I think about things like satellites, I get a lot of policymakers who will say, well, it's okay because you know what, 5G is coming, or SpaceX is going to provide a satellite service. All right, any of you ever use a satellite broadband service ever? Like you were somewhere in a cab? Yeah, right. Did you feel like your hair was kind of like turning gray as you were waiting? And, you know, and heaven forbid you try to do something like this. Heaven forbid you try to do it in a storm, or there's a lot of people getting on the network at the same time. So my point is we need to be thinking about future-proof technology. Again, Christy mentioned fiber. I would say that while it's going to take every tool in the toolbox to make sure we get this right as a country, fiber is essentially the most effective in terms of speed, in terms of capacity, doesn't matter how many people are on it, in terms of low operational expenses, which is really important when you're a small company, that you're not sending a truck roll out 2 hours every time something goes wrong. So one of the things that just happened, as a brief aside, I won't get into DC politics, but the FCC is in the process of rolling out a $20 billion auction for broadband connectivity. That's great. I was super excited about it. The problem is the biggest winners are those who are providing these fixed wireless solutions and satellite solutions. And I look at that and I think you have just relegated rural America and those areas that won to truly second-class service. In addition to the fact that I'm not convinced these providers can actually do the job. And what will happen is in 3 or 4 years, when these companies basically decide, oh, I can't really do it, those people in those communities who thought broadband was coming will not be getting broadband, and they're going to start from scratch. And we can't afford it as a country at this point in time to wait any longer to get Americans connected. So we look to celebrate what companies are doing. It is really important to share with policymakers the success stories. And I know some of you mentioned, I heard, you know, you're affiliated with local healthcare, obviously small businesses. One of the things that we have done is a few years ago, we created an initiative called the Smart Rural Community Initiative, because everybody gets so excited about cities, right? They get so, you know, so many things you can do in a big city. Well, that used to be interesting up until about a year ago, not so interesting anymore. And so we like to think we were visionary about creating smart rural communities. But what we did is we looked at companies and their communities and said, how can we celebrate not only that they have built these future-proof fiber-based networks, but they're working with their communities on how to utilize those networks, how to maximize those networks. What can they do in terms of telemedicine? What can they do with precision agriculture? How can they actually connect through local clinics and hospitals with telemedicine? How do we actually have these become the brains of these communities? You in Minnesota have 11 smart rural communities, and CTC is obviously one of them. We have 10 others, but they're companies who are forward thinking about roping their community in to get excited about the technology you offer. You know, Christy had mentioned, you know, the real estate value, and the number 2 question that realtors ask, no kidding, sometimes the first question a consumer or a small business will ask is, what is the connectivity? Your own website says grow Brainerd Lakes. You're already setting this bar for growth. And I will just share something that I thought was really interesting. Just yesterday, I read a report that came out from the Intelligent Community Forum. And the author had noted, he said, the future belongs to small and mid-sized places with broadband assets to fully participate in a global economy. The internet is a distributed platform that offers equal access to those who can offer it regardless of location, as long as it's good. So I look at that and I think, you know what? People are moving out of New York City in droves. I wish my daughter, when she lived in New York City, could afford the rent prices now. But this is a time I truly believe for a rural renaissance. I think of the work that you all do at BLAEDC in terms of job creation and key recruitment programs and economic development. Isn't this the time to really be able to reach out and say, you know what, we've got a quality of life, we've got excellent schools, you can take a walk with your family after work, and you actually have neighbors who will talk to you. So, you know, I think this is a real opportunity, but it's going to take that broadband to help drive what is going on and how that works. Interestingly enough, the state of Wisconsin, our state association over there just created a partnership with the Wisconsin Realtors Association to partner together to be able to highlight those communities to the realtors, to those people looking to leave the large cities, to really highlight the communities with robust broadband deployment. So again, you know, I know you've heard a lot this morning, so I would be interested if anybody had any questions. Let me just leave it with, there is a lot going on in this arena, but we still as a country have so much work to do. And again, you will never know how lucky you are to be served by companies so proactive as CTC. But I really feel very strongly about the mission to see what we can do to help the rest of the country to kind of catch up a little bit to where you are. So with that, Tyler, again, until anybody's had a second cup of coffee, that's all you want to hear.
Well, Shirley, thank you so much. Fantastic presentation. I know that the entire 4 pages of folks are really enjoyed that. And I will open the questions, and I know that I think if some folks do have some questions, again, feel free to type it in the chat and I can read it back to Shirley, or unmute yourself and ask a question. I guess we could let this be a little bit of the wild, wild west here and have it as a kind of a free for all. But one of the things that I noticed, Shirley, we're starting to get some of the early communication that's coming out of this next stimulus package. And what I found interesting, and I'm interested in your perspective on this, is that in some of that early language, it lumps broadband into the same conversation or same line item, if you will, as water and sewer. It talks about the ability to utilize some of these fundings. And again, this is early language, but won't know what that is probably for the next couple of days. But how has Washington been taking that on, and how is it that over the last year and a half, if you will, that broadband is being now mentioned in the same conversation as city water and sewer, those types of infrastructure that are needed in our communities, and broadband is included in that?
So I think this is a huge step forward. So, you know, we have a joke in Washington, D.C. about 4 years ago, there was this real effort to do, we're going to do a big infrastructure bill, because everybody realized, policymakers realized, that it was one thing that both parties could agree upon. It was the perfect opportunity to be a bipartisan effort. So we started having these infrastructure weeks out here in Washington. And at the very beginning, I will say that we kept having to kind of kick the door a little bit and be like, okay, you know what? Yeah, roads are great, but don't forget broadband, don't forget broadband. And we wormed our way into the discussion to be part of that critical infrastructure. You know, and you hate to, you know, I don't know, I kind of don't like the saying, but you know, that whole don't let a good crisis go to waste. Again, over the course of this last year, I had so many conversations with members of Congress who would go home and even doing their virtual town halls would say the number one thing that came up is broadband. And that's because people were cut off for working from home, and suddenly you didn't even know what you didn't have. And then you knew you didn't have it, or what you thought was okay because you were just coming home and checking your email, as opposed to 4 people being on the network at the same time. You suddenly realize the urgency. The good news is things like, I work with every campaign. So in every election, I work with all parties. And so this last go around, obviously we were working with the Trump administration, but I also was on candidate Biden's innovation committee. And the thing that was very heartening to me is on the innovation committee, broadband was front and center. It was always part of the platform. You know, the number of dollars looking to be devoted have varied between 20 billion to 80 billion to 100 billion. But I think thinking about broadband as infrastructure and thinking about it as essential is really important. Now, where I would draw the line is I'm not so crazy about governments thinking they can build a network themselves, because Christy would be the first to tell you it is hard, it is complicated, it's expensive. And so many times companies or governments who get into it and think that it's a one-time proposition. I got 5 million, I'm going to put it in the ground. It's like buying a dog. That's just where you start. It's the ongoing cost of running that network, maintaining that network, knowing what you're doing, that suddenly will surprise you. And that is where the initiative for governments to look to partner with local providers who know what they're doing, who have the tech staff, is going to be really important. So that was a super long way to say, yeah, it's really good that it's in the mix and that it's highlighted as being essential.
I appreciate that, Shirley. Thank you. I have a question here from Renee Richardson, who represents the Dispatch here in Brainerd, one of our local newspaper. How many years away would we be from getting broadband out to serve the rural parts of the country currently not served or underserved by broadband?
That's a great question. And I wish I could give you a scientific answer. So what I'm going to say is, under some programs that the FCC is looking at, they have created 10-year guidelines for distributing a significant amount of money. I think this Congress will add to that pot. I think that's going to get us to maybe 90%, 95%. The key is there are always going to be some folks who are very, very difficult to reach, whether it's a topography issue, it's a geography issue, it is an isolation issue. You know, it's going to be harder, but that is where I think that's where I always keep open, that we need to be thinking about what are those technologies that will allow that person at the top of the mountain to actually get connected. Can we do a better job just kind of spreading out across the country? Absolutely. So I tend to look at that we will get pretty close to where we need to be within the next 10 years. That's a long time. You're sitting there at home right now and you're envisioning that you might not go back to an office, or, you know, we may always have a traditional hybrid kind of life going forward. 10 years is a really long time. You know, again, you're in a state that has some very, very progressive providers, you know, but there are some parts of this country, you know, you hit rural Wyoming, you hit some of the mountainous areas in Colorado, you've got some really significant challenges. But I think if cooperatives in Alaska could actually build underwater cables connecting to the lower 48, I think we can do it. And I think we can accelerate that time frame if we can get funding appropriated to correlate with it. Now, the other thing I will share is we're seeing supply chain issues. So some of you who are manufacturers and small business owners, I heard you kind of talk a little bit. There's supply chain issues kind of everywhere, but right now there's supply chain issues in terms of getting telecommunications equipment. And so, for example, fiber is very difficult. It comes from Asia. There were certainly some trade issues that held that up. And then with the pandemic, they closed their plants for a few months. So there's a little bit of a backlog. And when I had the opportunity to talk to one of the big suppliers, they said, yes, but you know what? If Verizon comes in with a big order, we're going to basically butt check your small companies out of the way, because we'd rather make a $2 billion sale to Verizon than onesie twosies with small local companies. Hopefully that doesn't become a problem, but I will also say that's something we're watching very, very carefully in terms of what that does to the projections of how long it's going to take.
Well, great answer. And that's the one thing, obviously, I'm sure that Christy would mention this as well, that, the issues that they face in our region is weather. I mean, our ground freezes and they can't get in the ground, or they can go only so far. And this year, we caught kind of a break, I think, late, is that, the ground didn't freeze quite as early as it has in other years. So that was definitely beneficial. But, there's a significant part of the country that's can't continue to build this infrastructure out because they can't drill and get fiber into the ground. So
I would also say, because Mike does key recruitment, the other thing that we're finding is the ability to find good techs, to find people who can do these jobs. That is becoming, we actually have just joined a coalition of folks, and I had the opportunity to work with Senator Manchin's staff recently, talking about apprenticeship programs. How do we train young people to take jobs, whether it's, Christy's famous for her broadband in a box, but those techs that are out there teaching people how to do broadband in a box, or laying the infrastructure, or coming in and serving as technicians, you train them in a rural community. And what we find is suddenly somebody in Minneapolis offers them, $5 an hour more, and they're gone. So how do we find ways to create apprenticeship programs and recruitment programs and training programs? So I would also say that's something we also need to be thinking about, is this bigger policy for getting infrastructure built, is we need to have the workforce to do it. And you know what? We've got people who need jobs. In my mind, it's a win-win. It's the perfect time. I actually was sharing with them, I thought, remember under the New Deal, the PWA, the Public Works Act, the ability to say, what are our needs and where do people need to be employed, and how do we marry those two together? So stay tuned.
Excellent. Does anybody have any other questions? Feel free to unmute and ask a question if you'd like to.
Shirley, it's Mike. I want to say a huge thank you for coming and joining us. I truly appreciate it. Quick question I have. I remember you and I and Christy having a supper a few years back, and the conversation of the 25-3 mandate for, not just Minnesota, but ultimately across the country was the talk. We were going to put, telecommunications things in the ground. We're going to have a 25 download, a 3 upload. Obviously, we've learned in your conversation a little bit ago, 3 upload isn't going to do it for us. Have there been talks about changing that requirement as we look at federal funding for rural communities, and what might that do, or how our technology is going to change it?
And that is a great question, Mike. And doesn't it feel like a million years ago when we were able to eat dinner together in a restaurant? Yes. So 25-3 is the current standard that they have for the federal funding programs, and even 10-1 for some of the USDA programs. And I think, oh my gosh, why are you even putting money into these programs? One of the things we are talking to policymakers, and even some of our member companies, is aiming towards a 100 over 100. Again, it's that symmetrical speed. And 25-3, was table stakes, and it's insufficient. So again, that's part of, we've really tried to create this campaign around, aim higher, do better, and getting policymakers to think about not just in the moment, but that in reality, it's going to be more expensive. If you put 25-3 in the ground right now with federal dollars, in 2 or 3 years, you're going to be coming back and redoing that. That is not going to be sufficient. It'll be frankly cheaper to do it right the first time. Go ahead and aim for that 100 over 100. So we are hoping. Now, I will share that, not everybody's as enthusiastic about that as we are, but I think you've got to have a higher goal. And we think that one is reasonable. I will tell you, the satellite guys and the wireless internet providers, the WISPs, do not like us, and they are opposing us pretty viciously on it. But I still think if you're going to talk about using federal support, do it right. Don't go back and dig up and do it again 3 years later. That's just going to cost more.
Thank you, Shirley. I think Mike Larson had a question for you.
I think that might have addressed it, but earlier on, Shirley, you mentioned the innovation committee, and I was just wondering if there's anything that really excites you coming up on the horizon there that maybe gets us away from the dependency of fiber in the ground.
So I do think so. On the innovation front, I think there's going to be all kinds of interesting things. The one thing I will share with you, Mike, a lot of people do kind of go, well, you know what, 5G is coming, and we all see it on the commercials. The one thing to kind of share is that even a wireless product like 5G, which people in the innovation committee get very excited about, is a fiber-fed product. You don't get 5G coming to rural community. It doesn't come anywhere without it. It's a fiber backbone. So when you think about wireless, one of the things that is just it's again, if you're not doing this all the time, you don't think about it. But we tend to think that when we have our phones, that if I'm calling, you, Mike, my signal's going from me to you. It's not. It's actually going from my phone to a tower where it is then riding on a fiber network to another tower to your phone. So it's using spectrum, but it's also using fiber. And because 5G has the capability of being very robust, higher speeds, more capacity, it can only work with a fiber backbone. So and small cells. So the small cells have to be placed typically every maybe 500 to 1,000 feet. In your own community that could be 2 towers up a driveway. It's cheaper at the end of the day to just go ahead and put the fiber in the ground than to try to build this wireless network. So, but I do think it's interesting when we start thinking about smart automobiles and we start thinking about smart energy and what are the ways that we can use that fiber network to do more. So I would probably twist it and say, I think fiber is the key, but then let's think about what we can layer on top of it that will make us more efficient, effective, innovative. Where is the future heading? And again, smart cars, great idea. Can't do it without broadband connectivity somewhere in that network. So thinking through all of these pieces, precision ag, how do you really support those farmers in your community being able to monitor their livestock and the health of their animals? It's all that connectivity that eventually has a wired network somewhere in there. But how do you make sure you kind of mesh the two?
Well, thank you, Shirley. I see we are kind of running up to our time. We had until 9 o'clock this morning. If anyone still has any other questions, I'm sure Shirley has a minute or two, but if not, I'll give us a couple seconds to see if anybody's got anything. Well, if not.
And I'm always happy to have Tyler give out my information, always happy to come back one-on-one and just share some thoughts with anybody.
Well, thank you very much, Shirley. Great presentation. Thank you so much for the information. It's an honor for you to have joined us today. We've given us a lot of information, which obviously this is a very hot topic and will continue to be a hot topic moving forward for all of us. But we're pleased to have such a great partner with CTC in our region here. But and to have your support and to give us the background and the information that you provided for us today, it's tremendous. So thank you very much.
It was my honor, my pleasure, and continue the great work you do. I mean, you all are, I learned from listening to you. So the model you've set up is also something that I hope to take and share with others as well.
Thank you very much. Well, I will say thank you to everyone, and then thank you to all of our speakers and to the staff for making sure that we were able to pull this off today, and for all of the attendees. So that leaves Mike Larson, our board president, to say the final thank you and sign off. And thank you all very much for joining us today.
Yeah, I would like to thank you, Shirley, for joining us today. I think, of all years, this past year, 2020, has really been about business sustainability, and what a timely topic, of all years. The broadband importance for all of our businesses really come to light as we've had remote workers or connections with our clients remotely, even running this meeting in the format that we're running it. So good. Thank you. And thank you, Christy, for kind of your testimonial and talking about all the great things CTC has been doing to fill these gaps for our businesses. I also want to thank Candace for her testimonial on our key recruitment program, and Mike Bjerknes, wave your hand, because when she was talking, I was hoping people knew it was you, Mike, and not me, Mike, that she was referring to. But Mike does such a great job in our key recruitment program. And as we look forward to seeing business opening up and growing, Mike and the team at BLAEDC are a great resource for your business to tap into. And then I want to also go back to Commissioner Barrows and all of our units of government. The CARES Act monies were vital. I think Crow Wing County specifically was very progressive, and they've acknowledged that our BLAEDC staff, Tyler, Mike, and others on our BLAEDC staff were instrumental in dealing with all the logistics and helping our businesses get connected to those resources. So that was vitally important. And as we move forward, we look forward to a new 2021. Hopefully this next breakfast meeting will be with actual breakfast. So thank you all for joining us today, and wish you all well as we look forward to the spring.
Thank you all.